In 1939, the Waffen SS entered the war as an untested force fighting alongside the Wehrmacht in the invasion of Poland. Their early campaigns in Poland and Western Europe were marked by rapid advances, urban combat and logistical challenges, exposing their weaknesses and forcing tactical adaptations. Despite initial setbacks, these battles shaped the Waffen SS into a more organised and formidable fighting force. By 1941, they had evolved from an auxiliary political unit into a key component of Germany's military machine, just in time for the largest land invasion in history, Operation Barbarossa. The German invasion of Poland, codenamed Fall Weiss, Case White, was meticulously planned as a swift and overwhelming assault, designed to crush Polish resistance before it had a chance to effectively mobilise. The operation was spearheaded by two powerful army groups, comprising a total of 5 armies and numbering approximately 1.5 million soldiers. The overarching strategy centred on a colossal pincer movement aimed at encircling and capturing the Polish capital, Warsaw, with 3rd Army and 10th Army serving as the primary strike forces. From the north, 3rd Army, stationed in East Prussia, would drive southward, forming the upper arm of the pincer. Meanwhile, 10th Army would surge eastward from Germany proper before swinging northward, closing in on Warsaw from the southwest. The coordination of these two forces was expected to rapidly overwhelm Polish defences and force an early surrender. At precisely 4:45 on 1 September 1939, the German war machine roared into action. The stillness of the early morning was shattered by the thunderous roar of artillery and the piercing shriek of Luftwaffe Stukas diving down upon Polish positions. German armoured spearheads surged forward, kicking up plumes of dirt as they rolled across the Polish border. Infantry units followed closely behind, their advance methodical yet relentless. Amid the chaos of the opening engagements, SS Standartenführer Felix Steiner, commander of the Deutschland Motorized Infantry Regiment, surveyed the battlefield with a calculating gaze. Steiner was already regarded as one of the most capable and forward-thinking commanders within the Waffen SS, and his tactical acumen would prove invaluable in the coming weeks. He had played a pivotal role in shaping the training and doctrine of his men, emphasizing adaptability and initiative in combat. One of his most revolutionary ideas was that every soldier, regardless of rank, should be prepared to assume the role of his immediate superior if the latter fell in battle. This philosophy ensured that even under heavy losses, German units could maintain cohesion and continue pressing the attack. As the initial battles raged, the Germans encountered fierce resistance, particularly at Mława, where Polish defenders used the natural terrain and well-prepared fortifications to stall the advance. Nevertheless, the German strategy remained clear. Relentless pressure, overwhelming firepower, and swift mechanized maneuvers would be the key to achieving a rapid victory. The invasion of Poland had begun, and with it, the first chapter of what would soon become the most devastating war in human history. The Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler unit engaged Polish forces on the outskirts of Pabianice, encountering staunch and unyielding resistance. The Polish defenders fought fiercely, forcing the SS troops into brutal close-quarters combat. One SS trooper vividly recalled the relentless advance of the Polish forces. Through the trampled vegetation they stormed across the bodies of their fallen comrades. They did not approach with their heads bowed like men enduring heavy rain, but with their heads held high, like swimmers breasting the waves. Meanwhile, SSVT Deutschland, under the leadership of Felix Steiner, advanced southward toward Mława. Despite initial success, the unit faced significant logistical challenges, particularly fuel shortages, which hampered the mobility of their motorized formations. The terrain posed additional obstacles. The sun-baked roads were thick with dust by day, while rain-soaked mud hindered movement at night. The first major confrontation occurred near Mława, where Polish troops had fortified their defensive lines. The Polish positions were well prepared, heavily entrenched, and fiercely defended. As the German advance slowed, General Werner Kempf opted for a coordinated assault, integrating artillery barrages and air support in an effort to weaken the Polish defences. However, the preliminary bombardment fell short of expectations. Many Polish bunkers remained intact. When the 7th Panzer Regiment launched a direct assault, they immediately ran into a network of well-placed anti-tank obstacles. Polish artillery, positioned to maximize effectiveness, zeroed in on the advancing German tanks, wreaking havoc among the lightly armoured Panzer I and Panzer II models. The attack collapsed quickly, with 39 panzers either destroyed, damaged or breaking down under the relentless Polish fire. As if to compound the German misfortunes, the Luftwaffe's promised Stuka dive bomber support failed to materialise, leaving the infantry dangerously exposed. With the panzer attack repulsed, Deutschland's infantry was left to push forward alone, attempting to seize the Polish bunkers through sheer determination. The SS troops fought their way to within 100 metres of the enemy fortifications before being forced to withdraw. Outgunned and unable to breach the defences, the Germans had no choice but to pull back, marking a temporary but significant setback for their offensive. The following day, urgent reports arrived that German forces had shattered the Polish defensive lines at Chorzele, sending an entire Polish corps into full retreat. Seizing the opportunity, Panzer Division Kempf was swiftly redirected eastward to capitalise on the breakthrough, relentlessly pursuing the fleeing Polish forces. In this new phase of the advance, SS battle groups under the command of Felix Steiner and Matthias Kleinheisterkamp, reinforced by elements of the 7th Panzer Regiment, spearheaded the attack. The Polish troops, despite their chaotic withdrawal, fought bitterly to slow the German advance. Running battles erupted as the retreating Poles conducted desperate rearguard actions using whatever cover they could find. The relentless push drove them back to the River Naro, where they took up defensive positions within the old Russian imperial fortresses at Rozun. There, a formidable network of 4 well-entrenched forts stood defiant. The Germans launched successive assaults, their armoured spearheads hammering the Polish defences. Stuka dive bombers screamed down, blasting enemy fortifications with high explosive ordnance. Machine guns rattled incessantly as SS and Wehrmacht troops pushed forward. The Poles, however, were unyielding. In the close quarters combat that followed, German grenadiers attempted to force their way through, but with every yard gained, Polish resistance stiffened. While the attackers inflicted heavy casualties, their own losses mounted at an alarming rate. The exhausted battalions of the Deutschland Regiment found themselves too depleted to winkle the remaining defenders out of their strongholds. Adding to the Germans' woes, the battlefield was littered with damaged armour. 20 tanks had broken down due to mechanical failures, while 11 more were lost to Polish anti-tank guns. Just as it seemed that a final push might carry the day, Polish cavalry suddenly charged into the fray, their sabres flashing in the fading light. The unexpected attack shattered the German formations, forcing a withdrawal. But Polish triumph was fleeting. While the defenders had held Rozan, German forces had already crossed the Naru farther south. Realizing the threat of encirclement, the Polish defenders were compelled to abandon the fortress under cover of night. The pursuit continued relentlessly, with Deutschland Regiment pressing eastward toward the River Bug. Towns fell in quick succession, Chervin, Nadbury, each captured after fierce skirmishes with retreating Polish forces. However, a powerful counterattack from Lomza threatened to halt the German advance. Well-organised Polish troops struck hard, forcing the Germans onto the defensive. For hours, brutal clashes raged, but the timely arrival of the 7th Panzer Regiment turned the tide, repelling the Polish assault. By September 10th, Panzer Division Kempf had surged across the River Bug. Orders came swiftly: drive south and cut off Polish forces retreating toward Warsaw. The division pressed on, seizing Koloszym, Siedlce and Zelechow before pivoting eastward towards Jankowice. By September 16th, Kleinheisterkamp's battle group reached the banks of the Vistula, completing the encirclement of Warsaw. The Polish capital was now under siege. Despite their successful advance, the Germans faced continuous resistance. Polish troops launched furious counterattacks, determined to prevent their city's fall. Every street, every field became a battleground. With the noose tightening around Warsaw, Deutschland Regiment was repositioned northwest of the city, where it joined the assault on the heavily fortified Polish strongholds of Modlin and Zakrzym. Modlin was a bastion of defiance, housing some 35,000 Polish troops ready to fight to the bitter end. When German patrols attempted to probe the defences, they were met with relentless machine gun fire and well-placed artillery, suffering heavy casualties. For days, the Luftwaffe pounded the fortress, with Stuka dive bombers raining destruction upon the defenders. The thunderous bombardment softened Polish resistance, and on September 29th, the SS troops launched their final assault. Following an intense artillery barrage, they stormed Zakroczym with ruthless efficiency. Within 90 minutes, the fort had fallen. Thousands of Polish soldiers surrendered, their battered formations unable to continue the fight. At 1450 on September 29th, General Zehak, commander of the Modlin garrison, formally surrendered. The Germans had secured a decisive victory. Recognizing the role played by the SS in the campaign, General Kempf praised their performance, declaring, "If the infantry is the queen of battle, then you, the men of Deutschland, were the empress of the motorized war." Yet, despite their battlefield achievements, tensions between the Wehrmacht and the SS persisted. A confidential report submitted by Kempf to the Army High Command provided rare insight into the controversial SS units under his command. He described the Deutschland Regiment as, "in all respects, a fully capable infantry regiment," commending SS Standartenführer Steiner for his exceptional leadership. The SS Artillery Regiment was hailed for its outstanding results and great combat spirit, while the SS Reconnaissance Detachment, under its bold and energetic commander, was credited with exemplary achievements. Perhaps most striking was Kempf's admiration for the SS Signals Unit, which he lauded as achieving a level of efficiency I have never before experienced. While the Polish campaign had been a resounding German victory, it had come at a cost. The Poles had fought with unwavering tenacity, and as the embers of battle smouldered over Warsaw, the Germans knew that their campaign in the east had only just begun. Recriminations between the army and the SSVT began almost immediately after the successful conclusion of the Polish campaign. Many within the Wehrmacht, particularly senior officers, were deeply unsettled by the conduct of SS units, especially the Totenkopf formations. Reports of mass shootings, systematic executions, and the large-scale destruction of civilian property caused significant friction. Some army commanders were outright disgusted by these actions, viewing them as unnecessary brutality that tarnished the military's reputation. The SS, however, saw these actions as part of their ideological war, eliminating so-called enemies of the state without hesitation. This divide between the professional military and the SS would continue to widen in the years to come. Despite this, not all army officers were entirely prejudiced against the SS. General Werner Kempf, for instance, recognized the combat effectiveness of SSVT formations and did not outright reject their place in frontline operations. More importantly, Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Hitler were highly pleased with how their SS troops had performed in Poland. Himmler, determined to expand the Waffen SS into a formidable military force, argued that their effectiveness would be significantly improved if they were no longer scattered among different army formations but instead operated as a single division. Hitler agreed with Himmler's assessment, and for the upcoming campaign in the West, he approved the creation of the SS Verfügungsdivision, which would consolidate the SSVT regiments along with their supporting units, including pioneers, signals, and artillery battalions. This restructuring was a major step in transforming the SS from a loosely organized paramilitary force into an independent combat formation within the German military machine. While the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler would remain an independent unit, Hitler further expanded the role of the SS in warfare by authorizing the creation of two additional divisions: the Totenkopf division, composed largely of men from the SS Totenkopfverbände, infamous for their role in guarding concentration camps, and the Polizei division, which incorporated personnel from Germany's police forces into the frontline military structure. SS soldiers were actively engaged in checking the papers of civilians in eastern Poland, enforcing the new policies even before the campaign had formally concluded. The Totenkopf Regiment Brandenburg, one of the most notorious SS formations, carried out brutal operations, such as the execution of 800 people in Bydgoszcz, part of what was termed an intelligentsia action. These atrocities were conducted under the guise of eliminating resistance, deemed as partisan activity. Despite Himmler's ambitions for the armed SS, the Wehrmacht fiercely resisted its expansion. Many within the German army viewed the SS as an ideological force that lacked the professionalism of traditional military units. Hitler, while supportive of the SS, was not yet willing to fully antagonize his military leadership. As a compromise, he ordered that although SS units were now to operate as full divisions rather than being fragmented, they would still remain under overall army command in the field. This was intended to keep military operations coordinated and to prevent the SS from becoming an entirely autonomous force. The army also strongly objected to the SS's recruitment practices. They saw the expansion of the SS as directly depleting their own manpower reserves, believing that every recruit funneled into the armed SS was one less soldier available for the Wehrmacht. Under pressure, Himmler was forced to find his own sources of manpower. as the army refused to allow him to take men from their allocation. This moment also marked the official recognition of the term Waffen SS, signifying the SS's growing status as a distinct military force. A deeper explanation is necessary regarding the Totenkopf division. Unlike the SSVT, which was originally conceived as a frontline combat force, the Totenkopf units were initially raised as concentration camp guards, responsible for overseeing political prisoners and so-called enemies of the state. Each concentration camp had an attached Totenkopf unit, all of which operated under the brutal leadership of Theodor Eicke. Eicke was fanatically devoted to National Socialism and had ambitions to transform the Totenkopf troops into an elite force. Initially, his units were considered a dumping ground for lower quality SS recruits, but through rigorous training and purges, Eicke gradually improved their combat readiness. However, he remained infuriated by the perception that his Totenkopfverbände were inferior to the SSVT, believing that his men were just as capable, if not more ruthless, than those in the combat-oriented divisions. These power struggles between the army and SS, as well as between different branches of the SS itself, would continue to shape the internal dynamics of Germany's military forces as the war progressed. Service in the SS Verfügungstruppe, SSVT, was officially recognized as fulfilling a man's military service obligation, granting its members the same status as regular Wehrmacht soldiers. However, this was not the case for Totenkopf personnel, who were still required to complete 2 years of compulsory military service elsewhere, either with the SSVT or another branch of the German armed forces. This posed a serious problem for Theodor Eicke, as he feared that his most disciplined and ideologically committed men would be transferred away from his command, weakening the effectiveness of his force. Unlike the SSVT, which had been envisioned from the start as a combat unit, the Totenkopf units were originally formed as concentration camp guards, operating under SS control, but with no direct connection to frontline military operations. Despite this, Eicke was determined to prove that his men were just as capable of frontline combat as any Wehrmacht or SSVT unit. In 1939, official authorization was granted for the formation of the Totenkopf division, a move that allowed Eicke to handpick his most capable personnel and build the division into a combat-ready formation. To bring the unit to full strength, police reservists were added to its ranks, further cementing the ties between the SS and Germany's internal security forces. However, despite now being recognized as a military division, the Totenkopf continued to face deep mistrust from both the traditional military establishment and even within the SSVT itself. Many senior Wehrmacht officers viewed the Totenkopf troops as thugs rather than professional soldiers, while some within the SSVT hierarchy considered them inferior to their own formations, given their background as former prison camp guards rather than frontline troops. Eicke in turn resented this attitude, believing that his men were not only hardened by their brutal training, but also more ideologically committed to National Socialism than the standard Wehrmacht soldier. Despite his ambition, Eicke's Totenkopf division faced numerous obstacles, particularly logistical and supply issues, as military authorities frequently obstructed his requests for essential equipment. Unlike the Leibstandarte or Verfügungsdivision, which were given priority in receiving vehicles, weapons and supplies, Eicke's men were left to fend for themselves. As a result, he was forced to scavenge, borrow or even steal the necessary resources to ensure his division was combat ready. Nevertheless, by 1940, the Totenkopf division was deemed fit for deployment and assigned to the invasion of France and the Low Countries. However, much to Eicke's frustration, his division was held in reserve, denied the opportunity to participate in the initial assault, which was instead spearheaded by more established Wehrmacht and SS units. Alongside the Totenkopf division, another new SS formation was established, the Polizei division, composed primarily of personnel from the Ordnungspolizei, Germany's regular police force, which had been brought under SS control in 1936. The Polizei division was not immediately recognized as a true Waffen SS formation. Its soldiers continued to wear police rank insignia rather than SS symbols, though they adopted the SS-style eagle and swastika national emblem on their sleeve. It wasn't until 1942 that the division was fully absorbed into the Waffen SS, finally earning the right to wear the SS runes on their collar patches. However, the Polizei division never held the same prestige as the other SS formations, nor was it given the same level of motorization. Unlike the fully mechanized Leibstandarte and Verfügungsdivision, the Polizei division relied heavily on horse-drawn transport, further emphasizing its secondary status. Over time, however, the unit evolved into a fully integrated Panzergrenadier division, proving itself in later battles despite its inauspicious beginnings. For Fulgelb, the German invasion of France and the Low Countries, Hitler had assembled 139 divisions, including 3 Waffen SS divisions and the Leibstandarte regiment. These forces were divided into 3 army groups, each with a distinct role. Army Group A and Army Group B were tasked with the main offensive through Belgium and Luxembourg, with the objective of reaching the French coast before turning southward. Meanwhile, Army Group C was positioned opposite the Maginot Line, tasked with keeping French forces pinned in place while the primary German thrust unfolded to the north. Among the SS formations, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler and the Der Führer Regiment from the Verfügungsdivision were included in the first wave of the 18th Army under Army Group B, with a critical objective to seize key road and rail bridges along the Dutch border. These crossings were vital for ensuring the rapid advance of German forces deeper into the Netherlands and Belgium. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Verfügungsdivision was assigned to the second wave, focusing on securing additional crossing points further south. While the Verfügungsdivision and Leibstandarte took part in the initial assault, both the Totenkopf and Polizei divisions were held in reserve, awaiting deployment once the front lines had advanced sufficiently. This decision was partly due to concerns over their combat effectiveness, as the Wehrmacht High Command still viewed them as untested in large-scale warfare. However, once deployed, these divisions would go on to prove their effectiveness, engaging in some of the most brutal and controversial battles of the campaign. Although the Waffen SS was still in its infancy, the invasion of France would serve as a crucial turning point shaping its role in future conflicts. The campaign would demonstrate whether these ideologically driven formations were truly capable of functioning alongside the professional Wehrmacht, or whether their fanaticism would prove a liability in modern warfare. At 5:30 on the 10th of May 1940, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler stormed across the Dutch border, rapidly advancing deep into enemy territory. By midday, the unit had covered an impressive 100 kilometers, 62 miles, capturing Zaarol and, more importantly, securing a crossing over the river IJssel. Although the Dutch had managed to blow up 2 critical bridges, an assault group led by SS Obersturmführer Hugo Krass successfully forced a crossing, allowing the regiment to continue its rapid advance. After securing the area, the Leibstandarte turned south to link up with elements of the Verfügungsdivision, supporting the German drive toward Rotterdam. For his success in leading the attack, Krass became the first Waffen SS officer on the Western Front to be awarded the Iron Cross First Class. Meanwhile, Der Führer Regiment was tasked with securing another vital crossing over the IJssel near Arnhem. The Dutch had successfully demolished all available bridges, forcing the 2nd Battalion to cross under fire and establish a bridgehead on the western bank. Soon after, SS Pioneers constructed temporary bridges, allowing the 3rd Battalion to rush across and launch a full-scale assault on Arnhem. The city, which Dutch forces had expected to hold for at least 3 days, fell to the Germans in just 4 hours, completely shattering Dutch defensive plans. The next day, Der Führer Regiment smashed through the Gräberline, a key defensive position, and was soon given a lead role in the German Blitz through Holland, completing its advance at Zandvoort on the coast. While some Dutch troops offered fierce resistance, their efforts were quickly overwhelmed by the relentless speed and firepower of the Waffen SS assault. On the 12th of May, one of the great tragedies of the campaign unfolded when the Luftwaffe bombed Rotterdam, devastating the city. Due to a communications failure, the Luftwaffe bombers did not receive the message that the Dutch were ready to surrender, resulting in widespread destruction. Later that day, German paratroop commander General Kurt Student and Army General Dietrich von Koltitz were in the city negotiating the formal surrender when an unexpected incident occurred. Outside the building where the talks were being held, large numbers of Dutch soldiers were standing in groups when suddenly, the lead elements of the Leibstandarte thundered into the square. The SS troops opened fire immediately, creating chaos. In the confusion, a stray German bullet struck and seriously wounded General Kurt Student, shocking German commanders. Despite this, the Leibstandarte continued its advance, pushing towards Delft, where it captured 4,000 Dutch prisoners before arriving in The Hague just in time for the Dutch surrender on the 14th of May 1940. While the Leibstandarte and Der Führer Regiment pushed forward, the bulk of the Verfügungsdivision advanced toward the northern outskirts of Antwerp, securing the southern flank of the 18th Army against possible Allied counterattacks from France. However, when these counter-attacks failed to materialize, the division was ordered to move south into Belgium, shifting its focus to new objectives. Meanwhile, German paratroopers had successfully captured the vital Moerdijk bridges just south of Rotterdam, a key lifeline for continued German advances. Recognizing the strategic importance of this position, the French dispatched a relief force to retake the bridges, but their advance collided head-on with elements of the 9th Panzer Division, to which the Leibstandarte had been temporarily attached. A fierce battle ensued, and after heavy fighting, the French were forced to retreat, securing the German hold on the area. The Verfügungsdivision, now reassigned, received orders to attack toward the Dutch coast and capture the heavily defended Walcheren and Beveland Islands. Despite the Dutch surrender on the 14th of May, Allied forces stationed on the islands refused to lay down their arms, necessitating a full-scale assault. This mission proved extremely difficult, as the defenders were supported by artillery from Antwerp and naval fire from British warships off the coast. The attack on the islands was yet another test for the Waffen SS, as they encountered some of the toughest resistance of the Dutch campaign. Meanwhile, on the 16th of May, the Totenkopf division finally entered combat as part of General Hoth's 15th Panzer Corps under Army Group A. However, their advance toward the front was severely hindered by overcrowded roads, which were jammed with German military convoys, supply trucks, and masses of fleeing civilians. When the Totenkopf troops finally reached Cambrai, they were suddenly struck on their flanks by a powerful Allied armoured counterattack. On 21st May, a force of around 130 British and French tanks smashed into the SS positions, catching them off guard. Though many of these Allied tanks were slow and undergunned, they possessed heavy armour that made them difficult to destroy. To their horror, Totenkopf anti-tank gunners discovered that their 3.7cm anti-tank shells had little effect, bouncing harmlessly off the thick enemy armour unless fired at point-blank range. As the massive steel beasts pushed forward, some Totenkopf troops panicked and fled, exposing weaknesses in their training and leadership. However, after fierce combat and German reinforcements, the attack was finally repelled, though at the cost of several German tanks and many SS casualties. This battle marked the first major test for the Totenkopf division, revealing that while its men were ruthless and ideologically driven, they still lacked battlefield experience and the discipline of the Wehrmacht. As the German offensive continued, the Waffen SS had now been fully immersed in the conflict. Their successes in Holland and Belgium demonstrated their aggressive fighting style, while their early setbacks, such as at Cambrai, exposed glaring weaknesses that would need to be addressed before they could be considered truly elite. With the campaign in the West still unfolding, the SS units would have to prove their worth in the crucial battles ahead. As May 1940 progressed, the Totenkopf division advanced westward under fire, taking part in the final phase of the Battle of France. Though Eicke's men fought aggressively, their lack of battlefield experience was exposed during the Allied counterattack at Cambrai, where British and French tanks proved nearly impervious to their outdated 3.7cm anti-tank guns. The inability to stop the enemy armour caused panic within the ranks, leading to some Totenkopf troops breaking and fleeing before the situation was stabilised. However, the division quickly regained its footing and played a significant role in the German drive west. On 22nd May, the 6th and 8th Panzer Divisions, along with the Verfügungsdivision, were given urgent orders to strike toward Calais at maximum speed. The rapid advance saw fierce engagements with Allied forces. In one such action, a 30-man reconnaissance troop from the Verfügungsdivision unexpectedly stumbled upon a battalion-sized French force. The French, caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of SS troops deep in their lines, immediately surrendered without a fight. However, as the Verfügungsdivision pushed further, they too encountered heavily armoured French tanks, which proved to be just as resilient as those faced by the Totenkopf division at Cambrai. Once again, German anti-tank rounds bounced off the thick armour, forcing SS troops to engage at dangerously close range in order to penetrate weak spots. By 24th May, the Leibstandarte, now attached to the 1st Panzer Division, had reached its next major objective, the Aar Canal, the final barrier before the drive on Dunkirk. At this stage, the Allied forces had been compressed into a triangular pocket, stretching from Tenuzerne in the north, Valenciennes in the south, and Gravelines in the southwest. The British and French defenders had fallen back behind a network of canals, using them as natural defensive lines to delay the advancing Germans. The Leibstandarte found itself positioned opposite the town of Watten, where British troops occupied high ground on the opposite bank, giving them a commanding view of the entire sector. As Dietrich's men prepared to storm the canal, they suddenly received a shocking order. Hitler had personally issued his infamous halt order, forbidding further attacks on Dunkirk. The decision stunned Sepp Dietrich, the Leibstandarte's commander. His men were now exposed to heavy British artillery fire, completely vulnerable to the enemy observers positioned on the high ground. Faced with the prospect of his forces being pounded into oblivion, Dietrich made an extremely risky decision. He chose to ignore Hitler's direct command and ordered the assault to proceed anyway. The Leibstandarte stormed across the canal, launching a determined attack on the British positions. Despite fierce resistance, they succeeded in capturing the high ground, securing a vital foothold for the continued German advance. Shortly after, General Heinz Guderian arrived, furious that Dietrich had disobeyed a direct order from Hitler. However, after hearing Dietrich's reasoning, Guderian fully supported his actions, recognizing that waiting would have jeopardized the German position and given the British precious time to reinforce their defenses. Elsewhere along the front, elements of the Verfügungsdivision had also crossed the canal before the halt order was received. A reconnaissance patrol penetrated 8 kilometers, 5 miles behind enemy lines, revealing that this sector was poorly defended. Seizing the opportunity, the division launched a full-scale assault, establishing a bridgehead on the opposite bank before the British could reorganize. This bold maneuver gave the Germans a significant advantage, allowing them to continue pressing the Allies toward Dunkirk. Meanwhile, the Verfügungsdivision was given another critical assignment: to clear British forces out of the Forêt de Dnieper, a dense forest that provided a natural defensive position for the retreating British. The fighting was intense as the British put up fierce resistance, determined to hold back the German advance for as long as possible. However, on 28th May, the Belgian army officially surrendered, creating a catastrophic situation for the British. With their flank suddenly exposed, the British were forced to withdraw from their forest defences, though they did so slowly and at great cost to the advancing SS troops. As the battle for Dunkirk approached its final phase, the Waffen SS had firmly cemented its place in the German war machine. The Leibstandarte, Verfügungsdivision and Totenkopf division had each proven their willingness to fight ruthlessly, overcoming logistical struggles, enemy armour, and Hitler's questionable decisions. With the Battle of France nearing its conclusion, the Waffen SS had demonstrated its effectiveness, but its true test would come in the battles that lay ahead. On the night of the 26th to the 27th of May, the halt order was finally lifted, allowing Totenkopf division to resume its advance. This time the SS troops crossed the canal at Bethune, pushing towards Merville, but they were immediately met with stiff resistance from British forces, resulting in heavy casualties. Meanwhile, Deutschland Regiment, along with the Wehrmacht's 3rd Panzer Division, also advanced toward Merville, encountering a strongly fortified British defensive line along the Lys Canal on 27th May. SS Oberführer Felix Steiner ordered an all-out assault, with 3rd Battalion storming across the canal after a preparatory barrage from German artillery. The British defenders were driven out, and by the afternoon 2 full SS battalions had crossed, establishing a bridgehead. However, this victory was short-lived. The British still held both flanks, and Totenkopf division, which was supposed to support the attack, was still too far behind to provide assistance. Steiner's men soon found themselves in serious trouble. A heavy British tank assault crashed into the SS positions, throwing the German advance into disarray. In his post-battle report, Steiner recounted the heroic but tragic actions of a young SS officer who, determined to inspire his men, stood his ground against advancing tanks, defending himself with only hand grenades until he was ultimately crushed beneath the treads of an enemy tank. Another SS trooper attempted to disable a British tank by climbing onto it and throwing grenades, but he was shot and killed by machine gun fire from another vehicle. Despite having little more than rifles to defend themselves, the SS troops refused to retreat, holding their ground until an anti-tank company from the Totenkopf division arrived just in time to drive off the British armour. However, the Germans remained under constant artillery bombardment, preventing them from pursuing the retreating British forces. To the north, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler continued its relentless push towards Dunkirk. On 28th May, its commander, Sepp Dietrich, and his adjutant, Max Wünsche, conducted a forward reconnaissance mission near Esquelbecq when they were ambushed by British troops. Their vehicle was raked with gunfire, forcing them to take cover in a drainage ditch. With leaking fuel catching fire, both men were in immediate danger of being burned alive. In a desperate bid for survival, they crawled deeper into the ditch, covering themselves in mud to shield themselves from the flames. Recognizing that their regimental commander was trapped, the Leibstandarte launched a series of rescue attempts. However, 2 companies of SS infantry were beaten back, and even a tank platoon failed to break through. Eventually, a combined force of tanks, armoured cars and a battalion of SS troops was assembled to flank the British positions and attack from the rear, finally freeing Dietrich and Wünsche. By the 30th of May, the Leibstandarte was withdrawn from frontline combat, moving into reserve near Cambrai for a brief period of rest and reorganisation. It was soon joined by the Verfügungsdivision, while the Totenkopf division was assigned to coastal security duties along the southern perimeter of Dunkirk on 31st May. With the British evacuation nearing completion, the German focus shifted southward. By early June, with the Northern Allied forces effectively neutralised, all three German army groups turned their attention to the remainder of France. The Wehrmacht's next phase of the invasion unfolded rapidly. Army Group B, including the Leibstandarte and Verfügungsdivision, advanced from the Channel coast to the River Aisne, preparing for the final push toward Paris. Army Group A moved from the Aisne to the Franco-German border, and Army Group C launched direct assaults on the Maginot Line defences. At this stage, the numerical superiority of the Germans was overwhelming, with 140 German divisions facing only 65 remaining French divisions. By the 5th of June, the final offensive began. Army Group B, spearheaded by Panzer Group Kleist, launched a massive drive toward Paris, with both the Leibstandarte and Verfügungsdivision playing key roles in the advance. With fresh reinforcements arriving from Germany, the SS formations were once again brought up to full strength, preparing to play a decisive role in the final battles of the French campaign. By June 1940, the Totenkopf division had evolved into a battle-hardened unit, despite suffering heavy casualties and drawing harsh criticism from some Wehrmacht commanders for its brutality during the campaign. Nevertheless, its role in the invasion had solidified its place within the Waffen SS, proving that, for all its shortcomings, it was now an experienced and capable division. By the 6th of June, the Verfügungsdivision successfully crossed the River Somme, encountering only light resistance. However, as German forces closed in on Paris, French resistance intensified significantly. Upon reaching the River Aisne, the division came under heavy fire, with Der Führer Regiment managing to force a crossing, but at great cost. It became clear that the French were no longer retreating easily, and holding the ground they had gained would require a grueling fight. Rather than risk a prolonged battle in this sector, the SS troops were pulled back over the Somme and repositioned farther east, where resistance was expected to be less determined. By the 10th of June, Paris was declared an open city, meaning the French had abandoned direct defence of the capital, shifting their main defensive lines southward. Just 2 days later, on the 12th of June, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler crossed the Meuse River at Château-Thierry, joining the final push south. At this point, Totenkopf was finally released from reserve, allowing it to participate in the closing stages of the campaign. Meanwhile, Panzer Group Kleist launched a rapid thrust through the Champagne region toward Dijon, intending to cut off any potential French escape routes toward the southwest. Due to its fully motorised capabilities, the Leibstandarte was able to keep pace with the spearheads, while slower moving divisions followed behind, conducting mopping-up operations. The Verfügungsdivision played a key role in this phase, capturing 30,000 French prisoners at the cost of just 33 German casualties. A staggering victory that demonstrated the momentum of the German advance. By the 20th of June, the Leibstandarte reached Clermont-Ferrand, capturing an airfield along with 242 aircraft, 8 tanks, 280 French officers and over 4,000 troops. Just 24 hours later, the division advanced further, forcing the surrender of Saint-Étienne and its garrison. While the Leibstandarte continued its aggressive drive south, the Verfügungsdivision advanced more cautiously, tasked with protecting the flanks from French troops attempting to escape encirclement. At the same time, the Totenkopf division engaged in a ferocious battle against French colonial troops at Tarare, where it ultimately captured 6,000 prisoners after bitter fighting. Meanwhile, on the 9th to 10th of June, the Polizei division crossed the Aisne River and the Ardennes Canal, advancing alongside Army Group A. The French launched an armoured counterattack, leading to intense back-and-forth fighting. The battle seesawed for some time, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage, until the sheer weight of the German offensive finally forced the French defenders to collapse. The Polizei division then pressed forward into the Argonne region, continuing its advance until the 20th of June, when it was withdrawn and placed into reserve once again. By 25th June 1940, as France officially surrendered, the Waffen SS divisions were reassigned to occupation and security duties. The Verfügungsdivision and Totenkopf division were deployed to coastal security operations near the Spanish border, ensuring that no resistance or escape attempts could be mounted from the southwestern regions of France. Meanwhile, the WWII division was placed in Army Group A's reserve along the river Maas, while the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler began a prestigious march towards Paris, preparing to participate in the Grand Victory Parade that would showcase Germany's triumph over France. As Hitler and Himmler toured the battlefields, inspecting destroyed French Char B tanks and meeting with SS commanders, the French campaign had fully cemented the Waffen SS as a permanent part of the German military machine. What had once been an experimental force had now proven itself in large-scale combat, confirming to Hitler that it could perform just as well, if not better, than regular army divisions.
Yes, the war with Poland was unfortunate, but also inevitable. I would say most Germans before the war saw Poland as an ex-subject. We ruled over the Poles for a long time along with Russia. I believe we treated them well, but they also had a minority who wanted to be an independent state. After the First War, that became a reality, but it also over-emboldened the government. The Reds attacked them and they miraculously beat the Reds back. But they attacked our borders to take more land away by force. This went on until the 1930s. AR4 stopped this and it planted the seed of hate. Many Poles felt we owed them and looked upon Germany as a bully whose time had come. The Führer had one main plan, to reunite lost lands. He was very successful in this promise. But the English did not want to revive Germany, so they used Poland as an excuse to start a new war. I was a machine gunner in the Germania regiment. Poland was expecting war and was prepared for us. When we crossed the border, they had offensive postures. Our Luftwaffe outclassed the Polish Air Force and paved the way for the ground units. I saw our panzers for the first time and was quite impressed, which held an attraction for me for the rest of the war. The Poles, however, had better armor and knocked out a good amount. They were supplied with German World War I weapons, French and English tanks, and American trucks. I found the soldiers to be very agreeable. We often joked with them that they were headed towards Berlin, but not how they envisioned it. We allowed their officers dignified surrenders, and had orders to treat them with respect. There were some who were guilty of atrocities against the civilians, and they had to be investigated, but many were processed and released to go home after a few weeks. Polish civilians were well behaved, giving us very few problems. Many would bring food to sell to us, which, since our rations were sometimes meager, was appreciated. A few SS units had some problems in combat. We had been issued old and foreign weapons that hindered our ability to engage the enemy properly. I understand that old army officers have criticized the SS, but they issued us inferior weapons. They threw us into battle knowing we would have problems with poor equipment. Overall, we did very well against a larger army with better equipment. The SS was on the north wing of the attack. We walked into Holland uninvited, but the Dutch did make it clear they sided with the Allies, so they were de facto an enemy. They mainly put up symbolic fights and gave up easily. Lucky for us, we did not see heavy fighting until Belgium and France. By then, the Allies knew they fell into a trap, so they tried to break out, but failed. We pushed them into the Dunkirk pocket and then were ordered to stop. The Führer had his reasons, which many of us believe was to show he wanted to offer peace to a beaten foe. By now we had lots of confidence in our leaders and weapons. Our panzers broke the enemy open, but they had better armor than we did. Only the Panzer IV could take them on. We guarded many English and French prisoners and would spend hours talking to them when we could. No one could understand why it came to war again, as they seemed like brothers. The civilians were fleeing from the battles, and we had to deal with feeding them and helping them, which slowed us down sometimes and made officers angry. I remember our surgeon had to help deliver a baby with the sounds of battle close by. We enjoyed the weather immensely, getting suntans when we could. Some men were very active in pursuing French girls who flirted. Non-stop orders had to be issued on relationship rules and not pursuing married women, especially wives of prisoners of war.
The SS had proven itself on the battlefields of Western Europe, where France fell within weeks. The true test of the Waffen SS was yet to come. The victory in France had been swift, but the war was far from over, as Hitler turned his sights eastward toward his ultimate ideological enemy, the Soviet Union. The Waffen SS would soon be thrown into the most grueling and savage conflict of the entire war. Just a year later, on 22nd June 1941, the SS divisions that had stormed through France would be thrust into Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history, where over 3 million German troops crossed into Soviet territory. The Waffen SS, now greatly expanded, would fight in the vast forests of Russia, the frozen hellscapes of the Eastern Front. Unlike in France, where the campaign lasted weeks, the war in the East would be one of total annihilation, fought with an unforgiving brutality that neither side intended to restrain. It was here, in the Soviet Union, that the Waffen SS would reach its peak as a military force, but it was also where it would suffer its greatest defeats. The once unrelenting advance of the SS divisions would eventually grind to a halt in the face of the Red Army's overwhelming manpower and resilience. Cities like Kharkov, Kursk and Leningrad would become fields of unimaginable destruction, where entire SS formations were shattered in merciless tank battles and house-to-house combat. By 1943, the illusion of invincibility had been shattered. The Waffen SS had proven itself as some of Germany's most formidable troops, but even their tenacity could not turn the tide of a war that Germany was slowly losing. Despite the SS's ruthless determination to fight on, it was clear that the momentum had shifted. The same divisions that had marched victoriously into Paris in 1940 would, by 1945, be desperately defending Berlin against the Soviet onslaught, fighting to the very last man as the Reich collapsed around them. And with that, we wrap up today's video. I'm incredibly grateful to have you here until the end. Your support truly means the world to me. A huge shout out to my amazing patrons. If you'd like to support the channel or get access to some exclusive content, the links to my Patreon and Instagram are down below. I hope you learned something new, and as always, I'll see you in the next adventure. Take care and goodbye for now.